regarding our roles in society and our roles in the workplace. And so using the designing of clothes to kind of fund both on each end of the trade agreement, it also became a means to empower Muslim women and women of faith who wanted to be fashionable and who wanted to express themselves with the fierceness that they have, yet at the same time wanted to be respected. They wanted a man to look them eye to eye and not in their cleavage. So even in that journey of dressing them, that became a part of the means by which I empower women prayerfully. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about some more. Oh, she's out. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I see I should have went before society. My story is not as personally connected to the film as hers, but great film. Glad to be here. I think what I'll say is talk a little bit about the work that, Service Employees International Union does, SEIU for short. SEIU is a labor union. Yes, they exist in a right-to-work state like Louisiana. So we're a labor union, and we represent service workers. Service workers are cafeteria workers in schools, custodians, bus drivers, New Orleans City Hall employees, the guys you see cutting grass on the neutral ground, as well as historic workers and historic workers across the state of Louisiana. We have a lot of members also in Baton Rouge, so we're not just here in New Orleans. We're Jefferson Parish and throughout the state. So speaking to the aspect, part of the film about women, in our union organizing, we do encounter women who won't be involved with the union until they speak with their husband. Like, oh, I can't sign a union card, I don't know how involved I want to be, I need to talk to my husband. And that's in 2012, thousands of miles away from Jordan. So some of that can translate right into what goes on. We've had women come to us and say, oh, I need my union card back. My husband said this is too risky. I don't want to lose my job. This is jeopardizing my family. I can't be involved with this union thing. So we have lots of women in our union in leadership roles. We have, in fact, the political season is kind of wrapping up. There's some runoffs, but we had women running our phone bank. For maybe about 3 months, we had a crew of about 5 women, and they made 26,000 plus calls, talking to frequent voters. So these are women who were talking politics, and people say women shouldn't be in politics. These women were making calls and being involved, door knocking, communities, going to strangers' homes, talking to them about why it's important for them to vote. So that dynamic about getting permission, and can I be involved in this political work, can I be involved in the union, they are asking their fathers, and they're also asking their husbands in some cases.
We get a lot of women in our non-traditional programs like machine tool, welding, carpentry, air conditioning, automotive, electrical, and they do well. They do excellent. But one of the problems, and sort of piggybacking on what you just said, when a woman tries to empower herself and advance herself, oftentimes their counterpart becomes jealous. And I've seen them come in and pull them out of school, threaten them, do violent things to them because they don't want to see them to become self-sufficient. Because they know once they become self-sufficient and they start thinking for themselves, then unless the guy keeps up, they're going to move on. And, so it's unfortunate, but there are great opportunities out there, and all of the companies in our region hire women if they have the skills. And there's no such thing as a minimum wage skill job. They do very well, and we do everything we can to support them and encourage them. So this gives me an opportunity, and I left with the center here some information about the programs we have. And there's some great opportunities out there. What manufacturers are looking for to move into this area are more skilled workers. advanced manufacturing skills. We've got NASA out there that's starting a space exploration for the next 30 years. It's called the Orion. And they're going to put men on Mars and the moon in the next 30 years. And they've got 5 different contractors out there. Unlike before, they had 1 contractor. And so we've got our students going out there and working. We've got Latrim machine tools. You see them advertised all the time. They're hiring our students. And half of the students getting these jobs are women. And they're good paying jobs. $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year jobs after they complete our certificate program. And they can do that in a year if they go full time. So there's some great opportunities out there. I left the literature, look at the literature, but I would encourage you to go on the web and look at what we have to offer at Delgado in the technical division. Yes, sir.
Just a quick follow-up question for you. For the training program that you offer at Delgado, how much business education is also coupled with the manufacturing education or engineering education? For example, education on starting one's own business using those skills and not necessarily just getting a job at a corporation. Does that go hand in hand at all?
It does go hand in hand because many of our students become entrepreneurs. So we do have entrepreneurial component to the training, but in Delgado, the college, we have business courses, accounting courses, finance courses, entrepreneurship courses. So but they're not directly tied necessarily to the training. So, but they're offered in the college. But we do introduce entrepreneurship in all of our programs. Because once a student gets skilled, they go out, if they're a carpenter, they know how to build houses or cabinets or do interior work. They can go out and generate their own air conditioning people, electricians, so they can generate their own work. Manufacturing is a little different because you need some, expensive equipment, but they can work up to that. But no, we do encourage that. Because once you have a skill, then you're independent. You can either work for someone or work for yourself. But that's incorporated in all of our programs. And our faculty are excellent faculty. Many of them have already been in the business world, so they can give good guidance and leadership in that direction. And I thank you all, and I'm going to have to go.
I'm going to say this because I consider Ashé a really safe space, but I think there are probably 1,000 problematic things that can be found in this film and its portrayal of women, and its portrayal of Muslim women, and its portrayal of Middle Eastern women, and its portrayal of Middle Eastern men, and its portrayal of constructs of education in these regions, and its poor translation. And because this is a space that focuses so much on cultural competency, I think those are really important things to address from the beginning, and that the country of Jordan has a higher literacy rate than Louisiana. So that's problematic to me, first and foremost. The Middle East has the highest per capita rate of females in college is in the Gaza Strip. So I think there's a couple things, and I looked at it and it was did you go out of your way to find this one illiterate woman to show this empowerment journey in a way that then you reflect it and portray it on a region that has been working on solar energy and power because it's one of the sunniest places on the planet for over 20 years, is light years ahead of us, has the largest solar refineries in the world, and then really place a lot of problematic issues within it that lead to really thinking there's some really backward constructs of gender dynamics and education and literacy and technology. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you very much.
sorry.
Thank you. I needed someone to just blow that up, so that we can, begin to delve into a lot of the dynamics of the film. And I find it, I thank Ashé so much for not showing this film by itself, for having the film with a panel. So that women who have, for example, I spent about 7 years living in the Middle East, and when I walked in, I said, "Christy, what the hell is this?" And my question is, "Oh, it's a PBS film," and I said, "Okay, just coming from actually what most people consider one of the lesser developed regions of Yemen, coming from a university that's there, it's a university actually specifically for women, its level of, what's amazing about it, it has had some of the highest concentration of women scholars in the world. So when I begin to look at even how education was brought to these women, I said, wow, this is something. But I said, let me pay attention to, they're saying this is the first time an illiterate, this is the first time that illiterate women are given the opportunity to go to have a university education. So I had to wrap my brain around, we're talking about illiterate women entering into a university setting, so to speak. Because, as she just stated, when it comes to solar power, I think the largest solar plant right now in the world is in Abu Dhabi, which is in the middle of the Middle East. In addition to large developments of solar power plants like in Morocco, as well as definitely all over Saudi Arabia. And when we're also talking about educated women from the Middle East, I mean just the high concentration of university educated women inside of Egypt, where I was there in the summer and actually lived for 2.5 years. And just all over the Middle East. So I want us to be empowered, the women who are sitting here, to be empowered with correct knowledge. Because what's important is that a lot of times images are put in front of us, and those images are very powerful. But we have to be able to filter them through some very real experiences. So we need to be able to take something that's a PBS film, that's kind of an isolated situation, and be able to bring that. Like, for example, Jordan is, we're talking high metropolis, we're talking about highly developed, we're talking about serious universities, serious development inside of Jordan. But what does come up, though, inside this movie is being able to look at some of the dynamics of Bedouin women, which can translate actually to what women experience inside of poverty and inside of a lack of education. And that was something Jewel brought up when she was saying that, she's experiencing that in some of, where she's in SEIU, correct? SEIU. With women, women saying, I have to consult with my husband. And I said, glory be to God, how amazing this is for me as a mother and as a wife. And I said, because one of the things that I really enjoyed about the film was the cleverness that she demonstrated throughout, the wit in her language, and the wit with her family, and the wit with her children, even the wit with her husband. But on the other hand, what I found very challenging is how education, for the sake of material gain, and that's different than community development, because community development is so necessary. But when we look at that, when we look at education as to bring education and material gain being a threat to the family, then we need to reinvestigate. Because I would consider myself somewhat of an educated woman, somewhat empowered, and yet in major decisions I damn well bet I'm going to consult with my husband. Because we have no community without the stability of family. And that goes both ways. And whether or not this is something that is good for us as a family, this is good for us as a community, this is good for our individual relationships, and so forth and so on. So I just said a mouthful, but I'm dying for somebody to dive into some of that.
I think that's really interesting what you mentioned about translation, because in documentary films, we just take them as we see it, and we say, oh, this is the translated truth of the moment.
Yeah. And
oftentimes too in documentary films, there's questions about whether or not the subtitle is situated, even when people have dialects or accents, and so I'm really curious, without getting too detailed, like one of the translation was really disturbing. You both mentioned it, and it made me really curious.
Which one was that? What
were some of the issues that came up for you in terms of the translation?
Some of the conversation between the husband and wife was mistranslated. Even daughter. And the daughter tells her, you know, she goes to kiss her and she says, I have you, right? She's telling her how much I love you, right? And that's important because the daughter in this moment, especially looking up at the mother, in the midst of making these decisions, in the midst of her leaving and coming back, it's translated as I'm going to give you a kiss, right? Just very different from I love you, right? Especially inside that moment where she, you know, this is after she's returned and she's making the decision to go back, and she gives her kisses. I love you. You know, I'm not angry with you. I'm not, you know, giving you a kiss. I love you. And right, that's a very different thing.
Any other Yeah, because that, I mean, that actually really did shape my relationship to like what her and her daughter, like sometimes it seemed like she was kind of cold, though she cared a lot about them and obviously had their best interest like at heart. I mean, so like moments like that made me think she was a little cold, you know.
Right, exactly. And I think that culturally when we look at them as Arabs, I mean, let's look at the life they're living. You know, when we think about we could look across the globe at women who are living in poverty, you know, especially women, look at women in New Orleans. You know, when you're living in poverty and your life is the hustle and the grind and, you know, you just came back from a trip, get in there and cook. You know, yes, there is some coldness. You know, there is some, the harshness of your reality has definitely kind of, you know, begin to shape you. But there are some very sweet moments. You know, I heard between her and her daughter, like they did translate that one well. When her daughter's crying because she comes back and she's like, don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you again. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna. And that I find when we talk about traditional roles, you know, that sentiment of what does it look like when this is really about you. You know, when we're talking about education and community development, and I'm leaving you, and this is really about you. And you know, she talks about that also in the band coming back. As women in our society today, we need to reinvestigate that. You know what I'm saying? We need to relook at that. Because in my opinion, in my view of it, and I learned this. I have to say I learned this in my travels. I didn't learn this in my traditional role at home. We have to begin to look at it and say, why does education or my development, because sometimes in our empowerment or our confidence, why does that become something I throw back in your face? Why is it going to be something that if you don't get it together, I'm going to leave you? As opposed to you grew up in the same poverty, the same circumstances I did. What is it? Why don't I come back to you and say, this is what I'm going to teach you everything I learned? Because why? Be here all night. You know, it does become, and we saw in her when she came back and she said, you know, I like even how bad this man is, and I'm paraphrasing, you know, the stability of her family was extremely important. And this, you know, that stability of the husband and the wife and the children and all of that, because that is community development, you know, building blocks 101.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I want to thank you all for coming out, and I want to respond to Tasleen and Iesha's comment that ITVS, you know, is the filmmakers, and community cinema objective is strictly to promote dialogue about a social justice and injustice. And we record it, and there's a report that I do make, and they say, report an interesting comment from the audience, and that will be a comment. But you can also go on to www.communitycinema and talk to the filmmaker and talk to the people who create the film. So if you want to respond to that, that will be your point time to vent. But anyway, I thank you so much for that personal testimony, and you too. I thank y'all for coming out. It's such a diverse, like you said, a diverse panelist and a diverse group. And of course, we thank New Orleans Film Society, all of you who came out who support us